afternoon, or evening, everybody, depending on where you are. Welcome to the Data at Urban digital discussion series. I'm John Schwabish from the Urban Institute. I'm really happy to have Lisa Charlotte Rost and Gregor Aisch here from Data Wrapper to chat today. Couple of things. We will be having more of these next week. The list will be published later today or tomorrow. It includes Nadi Bremer. It includes me teaching data visualization to kids on Wednesday, so that will be fun. I have a whole Geek Squad situation over here with like 2 computers and an iPad and a big box that's sort of hovering. So look out for that. Tomorrow afternoon Eastern time, Enrico Bertini and Mort Steffner from the Data Stories podcast will be chatting. And I think that's pretty much it. I did buy an electric razor yesterday because the hair is kind of getting out of control. So I'm a little worried on how that's going to end up. My wife might just cut this all. We'll see what happens. And for those of you who are interested, here's today's data t-shirt. You have to sort of be in the know to know what this is. But I had this one created a couple days ago because I was running out of shirts. So anyway, okay, that's all I've got. So rules of the game are, if you have questions for Lisa or Gregor, just put them in the chat window and I'll just build a queue, and then you can unmute yourself and just ask them directly. No need for me to read messages. So I thought we'd start maybe by Lisa, Gregor, talking a little bit about, your background, what you do now, and then maybe Gregor can give us a quick origin story for Data Wrapper and let us know where it started and where you are now and sort of what you're working on now. It's the most open question I can think of, so I'll just leave it there. So Lisa, I don't know if you want to start by just telling folks about yourself, and then we can go from there.
Sure, I can start. Hello, everyone. My name is Lisa. I work at Data Wrapper right now as a blogger and or designer. So my background is actually in design and print design. I studied that for like 6 years here in Germany. And it was like a super classic like education with like magazine design and book design and like layouting. And because of that, I went to an internship in New York City at Bloomberg Business Week. They had like a super crazy magazine back then. They still have that, but the design was awesome. So I just wanted to learn how to do that too while studying. And they actually put me directly in their graphics department, in their data visualization team. And I have never heard of that before, basically. But since then, I'm hooked. And I've been doing that, like data visualization, in lots of newsrooms, actually, after graduating. So I created data visualizations at NPR. I created them for Spiegel here in Germany, for Zeit Online shortly, for another local newspaper in Berlin, Tagesspiegel. And I've been always blogging on the side since I was hooked with the topic. Like I've just thought, okay, if I have all these side projects, I can, also talk about them and teach others about them. So I've done it with a blog, and then at some point in 2017, Gregor got in touch with me and was like, hey, you're blogging, it's cool. You can do the same for us, for Data Wrapper, if you want to do that, but get paid. And I was like, okay, that's not a bad deal. So yeah, since the end of 2017, I'm working for Data Wrapper, mostly doing the same, like blogging, and also I've been a little bit responsible for the design, but that's something we mostly figure out all together. Yeah.
Cool.
Actually, I think it was like a more than a year-long process to lure you into Data Wrapper.
Indeed.
Did we first meet in New York?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I visited you at the New York Times.
Yeah. I guess it's my turn. I'm Gregor. I'm a software engineer and data journalist. That's, I guess, the closest I could describe it. My background is I studied a field called computational visualization, which is a very niche field that you can study in a couple of universities, 2 in Germany. And after graduating, I spent maybe 10 years, or in total, I spent maybe 10 years working on web development. before I discovered data journalism and using data visualization as a tool to communicate insights or relevant society topics from society. Yeah, from there, I guess I can fade into the origin story of data developer because I've been working on data developer for maybe 8 years now. So it's kind of, it's a big part of my life already. So in 2012, while I was still working as a freelance data journalist and data visualization architect, that's how I called myself. I got approached by Mirko Lorenz. He's a journalist as well, and also he's leading the innovation lab at the Deutsche Welle, which is sort of the BBC of Germany, if you want to call it. And he had this idea. So he was doing trainings for journalists in how to do data journalism. This was still a very young field. And he was doing these trainings and explaining to them that, yeah, you can use data in your reporting, you can use charts. And at the time, there were very little charting tools. You could use Google charts to create charts, but it was a painful process. There was many eyes for some of you might still remember them, a Java-based tool that was really revolutionary at the time. D3 was still being written, I think, or like the first version maybe was out. And at that time he approached me and he was like, why isn't there a tool that you can just throw in your data, in a couple of clicks later you have a bar chart or a line chart? And I liked this idea, and we had some funding from a journalist training institution in Germany, ABZV, and the proposal was to build this as an open source project, just as an experiment to see how this tool would be used, or if there would be use for it. So yeah, and we started. There was also Nicolas Kaiserwe, another journalist who was involved in the beginning, and yeah, in 2012 we set up an early prototype that was immediately used by The Guardian and other newsrooms. And then we launched the first version of Data Wrapper late 2012. And yeah, from there it just kept on gaining users. And we asked for more funding. And there was like maybe this 1.5 years where we just, where I was almost exclusively working on Data Wrapper. But it was still more or less a side project for all of us. Then in 2014, I got a job at the New York Times, and I moved to New York, and I basically abandoned Data Wrapper. And that's sort of the dark age of Data Wrapper, because suddenly we didn't really have anyone working on it. I mean, I tried to do some stuff on the weekends, but I mean, working at the New York Times is a full-time job, so there's not really a lot of time. You have not a lot of spare time. So that was a defining moment for Data Wrapper, because we had to decide what to do. And it was during that time that that we started. There was a third member joining Data Wrapper, David, and he really turned. He opened a new chapter of Data Wrapper. So we founded a company, and he really kept on working on the sales part that neither Mirko nor I have been focusing on in the same dedication as David is doing since then, and that really, like, he started growing revenue, and then in 2017 that's where really the next chapter started, when we opened our first office space in Berlin, and we were able to hire our first developer, hire Lisa. I was able to when I felt my time at the New York Times is over, I could start my new job at Data Wrapper, and from there it really kicked off, and we did a whole bunch of new features, and yeah, growing the team. And so far it's a lot of interesting. It's an interesting experience, starting from like a 2 or 3 people open source side project to turning it into a company. I think right now we are 13 plus one intern, and there's going to be I'm excited. We hired another designer for DataWrap, so we're soon going to be 15, and it's comes with all these kinds of transformational processes and stepping away from programming a bit and helping organize the team and figuring out what structure we're going to use in the company, how we're going to make everyone productive. And I think we have a great team, and for me, my role, I still try to spend some time on the product, and not just on meetings. And
that's great. So I'll just remind folks, if you have questions, just put them in the chat window. And until the questions start to roll in, I'll just ask, I guess the question on basically where you are now and where you're going, and I'll just prime it by saying, one thing that happened earlier this year, I think, was you changed the pricing model for people that, you can basically just use whatever you want. So, so that's just a prime, like, where are things now? You've talked about the team is already growing, but where are things going? Lisa, I'm curious about you've got the DataViz book group, you've got the blog, and you've got the chart a day thing. So I'm just, maybe Lisa, you just want to start about like what you're up to now might be the best way to sort of ask that question, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for mentioning the pricing change. We did it, I think, last December. That was a big thing for us. Because, as Gregor mentioned, from the beginning, this was supposed to be a tool to help just people, maybe like database beginners, maybe people who have not been like database experts, to help create better charts, maps, and tables. And so the pricing change was a big step in this direction. Like before, it was possible for people to use our tool for free, but they had like a view limit, like 10,000 views they could only have on like the charts and the maps. And at some point, like last year, we thought, okay, this that doesn't make any sense. If we want people to use the tool, we should make it open for everyone. And so we changed our pricing. We now have a free plan, like without any limits. You can publish like any kind of chart. You don't have any view limits. All these things are gone. And so now how we make our money is through these companies who actually want a white label solution, like who want visualizations in their own design, so that like the New York Times can publish a data wrapper chart without looking like a data wrapper chart, but like a New York Times chart. And yeah, I think that's been working well for us, and I'm super happy about the change that we made that change. And yeah, I guess in the future we want to continue that, like to make it possible for more people, to make it easier for them to create better charts, maps, and tables. And that means improving our tool, like adding features that make sense. We always discuss this a lot, and like also teaching them. And that's been my job, like teaching people how to visualize data. I've done some workshops in the past. We have this weekly chart that you mentioned. We have like the Database Book Club, but this is more like a niche thing for people who are really into it already.
Right.
But then I have like a series called What to Consider, and I started that in like 2018. So and I stopped doing that in the last months. But the idea of What to Consider was to have blog posts where I talked about, okay, what to consider when using colors in data visualization, or when creating a line chart, like just write like very basic, like this is bad and this is good. These are like the do's and don'ts that you should follow in like, I don't know, like 97% of the time. Basically, if you're a beginner, stick to these rules and you will be fine. That's what I've been working on. I want to finally write another blog post again that goes into the series, but I've been pretty busy already with like a whole chart collection of the coronavirus like yeah, charts, maps, tables. I've created lots of them, and they keep me busy fixing scrapers, all these things. I feel like a mini newsroom now. But yeah, once this is
Did you say
done,
you feel like you're useful now? Oh man.
no, I feel like a mini newsroom. I said because yeah, I've been basically doing what our users are doing, but like at Data Wrapper for the last like few
Yeah.
weeks, and it's been
Yeah.
interesting to do that again.
Right.
Gregor, do you
So
want to?
questions are starting rolling, which is great. So Felicity tells me she has a sore throat. So I'll read her question for you both, and then Andy can go, and then Allie can go. So Felicity wants to know about your criterion for adding functionalities or not to existing charts and maps. How do you not give into temptation when other companies are dropping a dozen functionalities in a quarter?
Gregor,
Yeah,
perfect question for you.
that's the perfect question. Yeah, I was about to talk about this anyway, because I think this is a very interesting process in our company, and it's also something that is I think it's different. It differentiates Data Wrapper from other tools in a way. Is that these rules and recommendations for what constitutes a good chart, or what separates a good chart from a bad chart. They have been part of the Data Wrapper design since the beginning. So the first pie chart in Data Wrapper had a limit. It had a hard limit on 5 slices. Somewhere it was just me designing the software, and somewhere I read 5 slices is a good number, and then the other data points would just group in this other slice, and I could just do whatever I want because it was an open source tool. There was no nobody stopping me from doing it, and I still think it helps people that a software makes some of these decisions. I mean, since then we had to we going into this process of we have our users asking for features like can we have 7 slices? Can we have 8 slices? Can we have a way to increase the number of slices? And we now as a company, of course, we are listening to our users, and sometimes there are good reasons for opening these rules, but it's always a source of intense discussion in Data Wrapper. It's one of the most fun parts of working at Data Wrapper is like having 5 people in a room debating about a radio selector. Yeah, but this idea that the software is not just like you just use the software and do whatever you want, but the software becomes part of the teaching process. That was part of Data Wrapper for a long time.
Yeah, it seems like it also seems consistent with the blog as well, because Lisa's blog is about it's about teaching and understanding why you should do, might want to do this versus that. So that seems that what's nice about it is it's consistent across the two.
There's a feedback going back and forth from Lisa's writing and to our tool. Yeah.
Right. And I'll also say, just from a personal perspective, like there was a few months ago, like I was using Data Wrapper every day for a particular project, and just for everybody else out there, like there are a few things that I noticed, or I just sent them to Lisa. I was like, there's a few like, kind of like minor things, but it's a minor things that as a user you want to see, and the Data Wrapper team, like they were both like, oh yeah, we can fix that, no problem. So like it was within a day, Lisa was like, oh, that thing's fixed already, so don't worry about it. So so I don't know if you want me to say this, but I would say from my personal experience, they were super open to having feedback from when I was using the tool. So I would just gonna put that out there. So so Andy has a question. Andy, go ahead.
Hey everyone. First of all, thanks so much for offering this. It's such a helpful service to have these. So excuse me, I was using Data Wrapper just recently, actually, for some charts I was doing for Marin County. I took your COVID-19 charts and replicated them for use by a local county in California. So first of all, I really appreciate you offering those. Thank you. It's doing a service to people in a local county in California. Um,
Thank you.
so one thing I notice is that some of these data tools, they make it really easy for you to integrate a story out. So it could be photos, it could be illustrations, it could be nice typographic elements. And you obviously don't, and I don't actually mean that as a criticism. What I sometimes find myself doing is using two different programs. If I need to do something that feels more like a data story, I will use Infogram. If I need to do something that is more focused on the details of a data visualization, I'll use Data Wrapper. But I'm just kind of curious about your decisions there and whether that's in the product pipeline or if you don't think it's really your place, which is perfectly fine. So thank you.
Lisa, you want or should I?
Gregor, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I think this is probably the I would maybe this is the triangle with three poles. One is the telling a story with a chart with a single chart. Then we have the interactivity, and we have the storytelling. Wait, what did I miss? Oh, the annotation layer. So far, Data Wrapper has been, or like we were trying to focus on the being able to create charts, maps, and tables, and annotate them and customize them in the in all the ways that you want, essentially. Kind of corner of this world, and it sort of contradicts the other one. So you have to make compromises or you have to make decisions when you design a product. The more you focus on interactivity, the more you get into problems when you have annotations all over your chart, and then you can zoom into the chart, and then what happens to the annotations, or what do we do when you have charts transforming into other charts and part of a storytelling process. It also, we always felt like we should try to focus on one thing and be the best in this part, rather than trying to be all over the place and do these animated globes that you can use for storytelling but also be considering data viz best practices. So I'm fine with all these. I like all the other tools as well that you can use. But yeah, it's also a question of complexity, and we want to try to keep our product maintainable in a way that we can still add things to it. And yeah,
Sensible. Thanks.
Great.
Yeah.
Allie has a question for Lisa, but I think she's got a couple kids running around the house, so it's a little loud. So she asked me to just read it out loud. So she says that your blogs are famous for being really in-depth, so she's wondering how long it takes you to research and write them. Do you have a review process for comments within the team before the blogs go out and are published?
Yeah, good question. I don't have a review process. So I have an editor now, which is nice. So I have somebody who looks over it and see as like a non-native speaker that I don't have any like grammar or like spelling mistakes in that. And she will also point out like if something doesn't make sense. And before I had this editor, I might ask someone from the team to read through it. I also had like a colleague who was a native speaker who always looked over these blog posts, which was super helpful. But I don't have like, okay, everybody read this one blog post I just wrote and please give me comments. I don't do that. Yeah, I guess my developer co-workers wouldn't actually have the time to do that. I don't want to distract them too much from the valuable work they're doing. How long it takes? That really depends, like how well I know the topic myself. So sometimes I use blog posts to learn about a topic, so I don't actually know anything about it, but then I think, if I don't know anything about it, other people won't neither. So that's why I'm writing these blog posts, and then it takes up to a week to actually research the topic, to read through the books of the database library we have in the office, and see what other smart people have written about it. And then I compile it all in one sweet little blog post.
Yeah, I mean, they are great. I think if folks haven't seen the Data Wrapper blog, you should check it out because It's also the big things, and then in some of the little things about, sometimes about annotation, sometimes it's about log scales, sometimes it's about, all these things that are the big questions. So Fernando has a question, and I'll let you just unmute and ask directly.
Awesome, great. Thank you so much. So first, let me thank you all for your time. This is an incredible opportunity. I don't know how much you know that you might have an informal following for a long time from like amateurs in database. So this opportunity it's amazing. There are certain big opportunities in COVID-19 apparently. So my question is regarding database types. So we see a lot of different types thrown around from professionals and amateurs, like scrollytelling, dashboards. There are so many different ways of creating a database. And I was wondering, given your extensive experience, if you have a more organized or disciplined way to categorize different types of data visualizations when you're trying to brainstorm an idea and trying to create the high level design considerations before actually getting down to the code. Thank you so much.
Do you want to answer that, Gregor?
They're both looking at each other like.
It's a tough question. I mean, I already mentioned this kind of the polls and I guess the one thing I forgot was like the explanatory and the what is the other one? Exploratory.
Right.
That's the kind of the two poles, and where we always try to stick with the explanatory to talk about the data, to introduce readers who are not familiar with data science or who are not data analysts. So this is a different corner than the sort of Tableau where you build dashboards for people who have already seen dashboards and who know what a chart is and who want more specific features. And I guess that's the classification that we sometimes use. Yeah.
Yeah, I
think that's the other part of the question.
Yeah, I think we don't think about these big categories too much because we are very much in that niche of we will never do dashboards or like scrollytelling, or maybe not never, but not in the next few years at least. So we think very much about, okay, what worked so far for our users and what do users expect from us, which is offering a good tool for making charts, maps, and tables that work very well without any interaction, actually. So this is important for us to not expect too much interaction and like hovering over the chart from the final reader to understand the chart. And I think that's what people use us for and have done so many years.
Thank you so much. So if I can follow up briefly, you mentioned that you don't see yourself working in the short term in dashboards or scrollytelling. Could you expand a little bit more around that decision?
Yeah. So it's not about that we think dashboards or storytelling pieces are not a good format. They're a great format, and in fact, people use data wrapper charts in dashboards. We've seen data wrapper charts being used as part of like custom coded dashboards. We've seen data wrapper charts being used in storytelling pieces, and from the product side, I'm interested in how we can make data wrapper charts maybe even more usable or more adaptable to these kind of environments they're in. But we have made a decision not to build this kind of tool that allows you to create dashboards or create a long storytelling piece. But storytelling pieces always consist of all kinds of different media, text and photo and video. You have quiz elements. You have, I worked at the New York Times for a couple of years, and I've built a lot of these, and I know that there's a lot of customization in these transitions, and I just can't imagine building the user interface for allowing to customize all these transitions while at the same time spending the same effort on the individual elements like the charts and maps that you create and the annotations and the all the details that you can add in Data Wrapper. So we, as a small company, a small team, we decided to just focus on these elements that people can use in dashboards and storytelling. And yeah, one thing I would like to do maybe in the future is to when you build a storytelling piece, you wanna communicate that, so the page the chart is embedded in needs to communicate a little bit with the chart to say, like, now is a good time to show this annotation, for instance, because now I'm scrolling down and now I wanted to show this annotation. And that's something that we are open to and that we have on our like long-term wish list. We have a list called the Icebox where we just put everything in so many good ideas for Data Wrapper, but it takes time until we have the resources to build them. Yeah.
I have a question, but to follow up on that, but I'll hold on to it. But we'll see. So Felicity has a question about which I think is not necessarily about Data Wrapper per se. I think it's about really any tool. But the sort of mantra on the Data Wrapper site is, we empower anyone to create beautiful charts, maps, and tables. And we've seen a lot of misleading visualizations about COVID, about the pandemic. And so her question is, should everyone really be allowed or encouraged to create and build data visualizations? I think that's not necessarily just a Data Wrapper. I mean, that's a really tool agnostic question, but I think it is a great question to get your perspective on, I guess, the data visualization creator responsibility to publishing visualizations.
Yeah, I think on a higher level, maybe Gregor can talk more about how we try to make sure that people actually create responsible charts, maps, and tables, and not ones that don't make any sense. But yeah, on a higher level, I mean, I understand both sides here. I understand people who say, okay, only the experts should be able to create, I don't know, COVID-19 charts, although, I mean, the numbers won't be any more reliable in these charts, I'm afraid. But yeah, only people who know what they're doing should be able to do that. And then I understand the other side, which says it's amazing if people have interest in doing that, like if they get interested in like stats and data and want to show it, and then they should have an easy tool that helps them do that. And I tend to be more on that second side. So I think, yeah, I think if people want to create charts, maps, and tables, they should. And in the best case, they put it on Twitter and somebody calls them out and it's like, okay, that doesn't make sense. But yeah, this is always the question of like, should tools be used for any means? Like, yeah, we as the tool maker can't avoid too much that people show data which is like extremely biased or doesn't make any sense. But yeah, maybe Gregor can talk about how we're trying to avoid at least a bad visualization.
Yeah, just briefly on the notion of expert it's hard to say who's an expert. Like, maybe I'm working in a big newsroom. Does this make me an expert? Or maybe I've worked in graphics for my whole life, but I'm just I'm not a professional, but maybe am I an expert or not? And I think what the coronavirus situation has very much shown us is that there's a wide variety of like expertise in big organizations, small organizations. You see responsible visualizations. You see people who take care of maybe not like explaining that this is just the numbers are just confirmed cases, that there's a total number that we don't know, like all these uncertainties in the data. And then you see some other organizations who just say these are the number of cases. And it's not that you would, it's not an easy line, it's not a clear line to draw. It's not just because someone is like in a, I don't know, respectable news organization doesn't mean that they make respectable charts all of a sudden, because it's all people everywhere. So what we try to do is just be the tool for everyone, both the expert and the novice, and try to come up with sensible defaults for for the charts, and we're getting more sophisticated with these over time. Right now, when we started, we had basically a default set of options for each chart type. But now more and more these defaults depend on the data set that you're uploading. Like the tool is looking at the data as well, and the tool is seeing there's a negative number in your chart. Maybe a log scale is not a good option. Then the log scale is not even available, or there's other kinds of. I like this feature we added last year, I think, that when you this is the big debate about a line chart, should it go to 0 or not, and I still think there's no definite answer to this, because sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't make sense. And DataWrapper kind of embodied this ambiguity about this by making an educated guess. Like, your data set is close enough to 0, then why not just include it? And that's not something that the user has to do, but DataWrapper is doing it automatically. You have a data set. I think there's some rule that, like, if I expanded the axis by 30% and it would include 0, then just expand the axis right away. While if you're like in some millions of, then we don't force you to look at a straight line all the time.
Right. So there's a bunch of questions rolling in, so I'll just let folks go in this order: Raul, Fernando, Luke, and Doug. So Raul, why don't you go first? I think you're there. Oh, do I need to unmute you? There we go.
Yeah. Hi, Jon.
Hey.
Hi, Lisa. Hi,
Hey.
Gregor. Here from Lima, Peru. Yeah, I have a question about the database book club that you have, and I want you to tell us how was this experience and what are the plans for the near future for this activity.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you.
I started the Database Book Club in 2018 because of a problem I faced, which is I have all these books, or like we have all these books in the database library in our office, and I just don't read them. Like I use them for research when I write blog posts, and then I read like 2 paragraphs or like a chapter or so. But I've never actually read like the whole thing, or like only for a few books. So I thought, okay, again, I thought maybe if that's my problem, maybe that's other people's problem too. And so the Database Book Club wants to set a motivation to finally read all these database books that you've always wanted to read. And we've read like 8 books so far and discussed them. We've also discussed academic database papers the last time, like 6 of them. But normally we choose a book, we ask the author to also join a discussion, and the discussion is happening online. So it's completely digital. I organized a few local Berlin meetups now and then, but actually it works super well just having a digital in one big like Google Docs like notepad where everybody can write at the same time. And yeah, I don't have any big ambitions for this. Like in the next months or years, let's see how it goes. But yeah, I'm adding more and more books to the reading list, and we read like 1 book every 2 or 3 months, so like 4 or 5 a year maybe, and that's been a good, that's been a good number, I think, and it's going well, and people are excited every time they join, and yeah, and it's working well. I mean, I've read many books by now. It's going well.
Cool. Congratulations for your job at DataWrapper. I like it very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Great. Fernando had a follow-up question for you. So go ahead, Fernando.
Yeah, so a quick question. So mostly regarding Greg's past work at the New York Times. I don't know if people in the meeting remember this 3D visualization of the yield curve. I was doing my PhD in economics at the time, and I found it fascinating that it was actually one of the unique 3D visualizations that wasn't just shiny, but what was also very insightful. So I was wondering if you have created any other 3D visualizations, or more in general, if you have been exploring with unorthodox formats like, you know, 3D, VR, any of those types. Have you been exploring in that space as well? Thank you.
Yeah, of course I remember the 3D yield curve. It wasn't just me working on it. It was I would say it was mostly the work of Amanda Cox, who it was her idea, it was her dream to have a 3D representation of the yield curve. I didn't even know what the yield curve is until she approached me with this idea. And it was a unique moment because the first time, like, the technology was there to put these 3D things on the web with WebGL. But no, since then I haven't really done a lot of 3D visualizations afterwards. I'm still like, I still very much favor two-dimensional graphics, I think. Also in VR space, I'm also I guess I'm very boring in that regard. I'm not super excited about AR and VR. Maybe I should be more excited, but so far I just like the good old two-dimensional world. Also, there's one thing that we forgot to that I forgot to mention earlier, is that there's also another line in DataWrapper that is, you can embed the charts online and you can also print them. And that's been like a huge influential factor for all of our design decisions, because as soon as you start like putting all these interactive components, you can't really print the thing anymore. And so this is a balancing act that we have to face. And the same with, I guess, with 3D and VR, and then.
Right. So let's see. Luke had a question specifically about DataWrapper technical issues. So, Luke, there you are. Go ahead.
Hi, thanks, you guys. I'll just read what I wrote in the chat thing. What advice do you have for dealing with technical issues? I had a legend issue in a scatter plot I was making recently, and I just couldn't even figure out if it was a bug or if I was just missing kind of something really obvious. And I should say I'm pretty new to DataWrapper, so there may just genuinely be an obvious, chat room or something I'm missing. But what advice do you have for that kind of issue?
So I guess the easiest thing for you to do is to just write to support@datawrapper.de. I mean, most products have a support address that you can write to and nobody ever replies, but we actually have a really good support team. Ilana is doing most of it. And we do read every email and we reply. We will reply, and if it's a bug, then we might know about it, and you get an estimate when we're gonna fix it, or maybe there's not a bug, or maybe there's a workaround that a lot of users have been using, or there's an Academy article that helps you with your problem. I guess that's the easiest. Just send an email.
Awesome, thanks.
You're welcome.
Great, let's see. Doug has a question about the DataWrapper API.
Well, yes. Hi, I'm Doug. I work with John at the Urban Institute. I'm kind of a jack of all trades and not master of none, really. And so DataWrapper is totally new to me, but it looks really cool. And I love your API documentation, the Python. I just wondered if you have any, since I'm basically lazy, any starter programs like a library, a package in GitHub that would be a good place to start playing around with it. And for the programmers that we have there, they might be interested.
Yeah, Lisa, you can talk about your the blog post. We have written some like tutorials and introductions to our API. But we haven't even the Python and the R libraries that exist for DataWrapper, they're not maintained by us, but by users who thought it would be a good way to make it easier to use the DataWrapper API. So far, we've only worked on our side of the API and the documentation and the tutorials. Yeah.
No, I'll definitely check it out. I'll look at the blog post. That would be a good place to start. Thank you so much.
Yeah, definitely. The best place to start with the API is probably the developer.datawrapper.de site.
Okay.
So on that site, we have tutorials also, like we go through creating a bar chart just with the API, for example, and like a map, I think. And there's the whole reference on there. So yeah, that's the best place to start.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and also if you find anything that is still not clear from the documentation, just drop us a note, and we are happy to incorporate your experience and getting the improving our documentation and the tutorials. Thank you.
Great. We're almost up at time. I don't see any other questions in here, so I wanted to ask mine since I have
You
priority,
had
I
back for
guess.
so long.
I know, right? So I want to get back to this explanatory, exploratory thing that we've all tried to define in amorphous ways. Gregor, I think it was at the first Info Plus conference, you had this sort of famous or infamous talk where you talked about how, some small percentage of people actually got through a New York Times visualization. I think we all sort of embrace that in some ways. There seems anecdotally to be a big move away from the big interactive pieces to just more static stuff. And I'm just curious about your perspective, both of you really, on your perspective now about the balance between the big interactive pieces where you click and move and scroll and this and that versus, just a single static bar chart or line chart, and maybe to take that step forward, like where you see the field going over the next few years.
Who wants to go first?
You go first.
I mean, at the time of the Info Plus conference, I think that was definitely the main movement was at least for us at the New York Times was like this could have been an interactive piece, but we have this tool that allows us to create a static chart in just a quarter of the time, and the static chart does not interfere with the reading experience of a longer story so much, and it's easier to. There's a lot of benefits. There were a lot of benefits, but I think that since then there's definitely been really cool stuff with these like explainer pieces, interactive explainer pieces, where you're not just a consumer of the charts, but you can actually change parameters of the chart. You can change confidence intervals to see what happens, or you can change scenarios in a simulation, and those are very valid use cases for interactive charts, and I think it makes total sense to focus your resources on these projects that are that have a valid use of interactivity, as opposed to like let's call it the iPad magazine times, where it's just like you just create these interactive pieces to justify that you now read on an iPad, and it's not improving. It's interactivity is not just a means to an end. Ends to a means to an end. Yeah.
One of those two, yeah.
One of those two.
Yeah, I think when Gregor gave his talk back then, the scene was still very much trying things out, a lot more than they're doing right now.
Yeah.
And that also came with interactivity. I don't think we have super many exciting pieces anymore, and we had them like 5 years ago and 6 years ago and 7 years ago and like 4 years ago. And I think this is the biggest development I see, that like data visualization is actually arriving more like in teams beyond the graphics teams, in like in a newsroom, for example. Like everybody, or like many more people, want to go behind it and want to learn how to do it, and like the graphics team gets more requests from other people who just want a simple chart, or like want a big thing, but then get a simple chart because the graphics team doesn't have any time to do all these requests. And I think that's what we've been seeing, like a few less super exciting pieces, but still these, like a good ratio between big projects that come out like once every 3 months or so in a newsroom, and like lots of smaller visualizations that are super, super helpful in like lots of articles.
Yeah. That's great. So there are two final questions. One on from Fernando. Not sure how much you can share, but it would be great to know if you could list a couple of tools you use in your daily work. So he has a list there. I don't know if you have other tools that you want to mention.
yeah, I think for data analysis, but we're not doing that so much. I've been doing that a lot now because of the COVID-19 charts. But yeah, I've been using R a lot. Not so much Jupyter notebooks. I don't work with Python so much. But yeah, of course, Sublime, Adobe Illustrator, Adobe Photoshop for like feature images. I like write all my blog posts in Sublime as Markdown. So this is what I'm seeing a lot. Yeah, I don't know, like GitHub, Slack, email, all these things.
Yeah, Gregor, do you have anything to add to the list?
I just want to advertise Svelte. It's a front end like React or Vue. It's a front end language that you write nice templates and it generates JavaScript applications that get out of the way. So and you can use it for data visualizations as well. And I think that's maybe one of I mean, Rich Harris, the main developer behind Svelte, is working at the New York Times, and that's why now you see more and more of these Svelte charts in the Times. And one nice thing about them is that they might end up looking like a static chart. Because you don't see the interactivity, you don't see it, but it's still a dynamic visualization. It's a reactive visualization. And you can generate the entire thing on the server side, that you really only ship a piece of SVG code and some HTML to the client side. So I'm really excited about Svelte, and that's we've been using it in Data Wrapper more and more, and it's a whole we're transitioning our whole stack to this. So it's a very techy tool, but
Right. Yeah, but I'm sure there are people in this call who are interested, so that's great. And I think Felicity's question is a good last one. What is the best non-COVID and non-data wrapper viz you have seen recently?
Wow, non-COVID is kind of
non-COVID, which I think is the real challenge.
So, which is like 2 months ago, I guess.
No, I think it was like 37 years ago at this point.
Oh yeah, right. Oh man, non-COVID.
Yeah.
What was the second? The second rule?
Non-COVID and non-data wrapper.
Non-data wrapper.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Of course, even being primed to say non-COVID, all I can think of are things that are COVID.
Yes, exactly.
All right, how about let's simplify it. Do you have a favorite non-COVID data wrapper, either a single viz or a piece that's come out recently? Either that you guys have done or one of your partners or clients has done?
It's a good question.
I mean, before COVID, I was totally immersed in climate change visualization, and that was like, I even made like the promise to myself, like climate change is going to be the only topic that I'm going to be visualizing for like the foreseeable future. So I've been really into those. But it's really like it's astonishing how COVID-19 has sort of like wiped out all my long-term memory.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Definitely. When it comes like to data wrapper charts, I think New America is doing a great job. New America is like I think DC-based think tank.
Yep.
And they're really bringing data wrapper to the edge. Like they're just like find all the workarounds and like put a lot of annotations in their charts, and it's been super nice to see what they've been doing. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I think we'll close up. Thanks to you both for taking time and chatting with us and everybody. This was really interesting. A lot of great thoughts. So thanks so much.
Yeah, sure.
And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll be here again tomorrow at 2 with Enrico and Moritz. If you want to ask questions about podcasts or other things, I don't know. So feel free to stop by. So thanks again. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you soon. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Bye.
See you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Have fun tomorrow.
Thanks. I'll see you guys soon. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.